Hello, hello.
Hi.
Hola, Tabe.
Hola.
Hi, Rina.
Hello, Hooray.
And
Hi, everyone. Welcome. Warm welcome,
Hello.
everyone.
Thank you.
Yes, hello to everyone. Good to see you.
Thank you so much for joining us. It's a joy to be here with all of you today. So I'll be your host. My name is Maria Paula. I'm thrilled to have my very good friend and co-teacher, Jorge. Thank you so much for accepting this invitation and for sharing this beautiful practice with us. Thank you also, Joel, for being here in behalf of GCC. He will be supporting us in anything that we need tech-wise. So if you have any issues or questions, please feel free to reach out to Joel. If you can say hello so that they can see where you are. Perfect. Thank you so much for being here. And I invite you to say hello on chat and share where you're joining us from. And in that way, we can see our global community joining in. I know it's the end of the day in the UK and Europe. So if you're here joining us from Norway, thank you so much for being here at this time. And I don't know if it's also your first time joining the Global Compassion Coalition. So I want to introduce a little bit what is it that we do at GCC. So we are a Global Compassion Coalition, as its name says, and we want to offer compassion education, high quality compassion education around the world. And in that purposes, we offer practices each month or a couple of months in between. But the intention is to have an opportunity to connect, to come together, to share the value of compassion, and to learn and deepen our understanding around compassion. And Jorge is an absolute expert in the field and a pioneer in the field as well. So it's a joy to have you here, Jorge. Thank you so much. And I'm going to introduce briefly a little bit about Jorge's experience and path. He's a clinical psychologist. He's a mindful self-compassion certified teacher and teacher trainer. And he's also a deep practitioner, a deep mindfulness and compassion practitioner. And above all, I know his heart and I trust his heart. So I know you're all in for a treat in this beautiful practice. And I know, Jorge, you'll be leading us into a soft landing for us to arrive and to start this practice together.
Thank you, Maria Paula. Let me just share with all of you that Maria Paula is co-leading this with me, just for the record. And she is also a mental health practitioner and also a very long-term mindfulness and compassion-based teacher. And I'm also really delighted because she's not only a colleague, but a friend, and she really embodies these practices. So you will also get to enjoy her presence. And
thank you, my friend.
Thank
you for saying that.
You're welcome. So let's just in the self-compassion world, we often call this the soft landing, or in some other mindfulness worlds. So let's just come literally for a 30-second just landing. And so I'm going to invite all of you to turn your attention inward, if that feels right, closing your eyes or holding a soft gaze, and taking a moment to notice your body here now, aware of the points of contact. Aware of your body in space, the length, the depth of your body. And perhaps you're noticing that the mind is busy with what just happened or what might happen next. And that's okay. That's what minds do. But see if you can let the mind know, I'll be back. I'll be back in a little bit. And then dropping into noticing the breath moving in your body, just feeling the breath. And then bringing awareness to your entire body. And see if you can welcome yourself to this space, just like you would welcome a friend you haven't seen in a long time. So good to see you. Glad you're here. See if you can offer that to yourself in this moment. And then gently transitioning from the inside to the outside, widening your gaze. And taking a look at the beautiful people in front of you. And I'm aware that some of you may need to have your cameras off, but if you can, it will be great to see your faces. It's one of the treats of teaching, getting to see people from all over the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jorge. And I see we have people from all over the world. So welcome, everyone. We have people from the US, from Ukraine, Philadelphia, Florida, Laguna Beach, Amsterdam, Seattle, Greece. I'm in Colombia. I know, Jorge, you're in Boston. So warm welcome, everyone. And it's important for us to share that we are inspired in the protocol Mindful Self-Compassion for Shame, developed by Chris Germer. And that's what we want to offer today, a taste of this very powerful and beautiful practice that is part of this larger curriculum and program. And after exploring self-compassion, I don't know if some of you are already familiar with self-compassion. If we can see a raise of hands, if you maybe have practiced. Yes, beautiful. It's okay if this is your first time as well. So we understand self-compassion as an antidote to shame. So Jorge will be sharing us a little bit about what is shame and why we want to address it with self-compassion. But we're going to start with a brief reminder of what is self-compassion. So simply put, it's treating ourselves with the same kindness, love, and understanding that we would offer to a friend when we are suffering. But if we think of situations in which we are suffering, this might only be an aspiration. So I'm going to invite you to chat, to share on chat, how do you treat a friend when a friend is suffering? What do you notice there? You can open your chat and share your thoughts. Thank you, David. You listen. What else happens when a friend is suffering? We are supportive and gentle. Beautiful. And what happens when we are suffering? How do we treat ourselves? I see some answers coming in with love, kindness, attention. Attend to what they are saying. Beautiful. And now what happens when we are suffering? What do you notice? What is it that we do? We ignore our own suffering. Absolutely. We're critical. We shut down. Our inner critic comes up. Yes. Can we all relate to this? We don't give time to ourselves. Absolutely. And that really increases our suffering or perpetuates our suffering. So if we are already suffering and we judge ourselves or we are self-critical, what we are doing is we are increasing the suffering, and we are losing the ability to be there for ourselves, to be present for ourselves. So I'm going to share the operational definition that we use at Mindful Self-Compassion that is developed by Kristen Neff back in 2003. And it's the one that we use not only for research, but also to have like this very basic understanding on how we can cultivate the different aspects of self-compassion. So the first piece is to be fully present for ourselves, for our suffering, instead of denying our suffering or maybe over-identifying with it. So that is on chat. You can see a beautiful slide that Jorge just put in. That is the presence aspect. So in the loving, connected practice of offering self-compassion to ourselves, we can start with mindfulness. That is really noticing what's happening as it is happening, but remembering that we are not our suffering. We are more than our suffering. The second aspect, we call it the shared common humanity versus isolation. That is the connected piece. So sometimes we tend to shut down, sometimes we isolate, or sometimes we just feel very alone in our suffering, like no one can truly understand what we are going through. But the truth is that we all suffer one way or another. We are all in this together, in the same boat. And then the most intuitive aspect of self-compassion is, of course, the self-kindness, the loving aspect, the warmth, the tenderness, the ability to protect and to care for ourselves. So usually we criticize ourselves, or we even actively harm ourselves, knowingly or unknowingly. So that is why we individually can cultivate each of these skills or resources, being more loving, being more present, more attentive, and recognizing that we are in this together, that we belong, that we are not alone. And in this way, we have very core question around self-compassion. What am I feeling right now? And also, what do I need? So it can become our mantra all the time. What am I feeling and what do I need? And in that way, we are tuning into our self-to-self relationship and monitoring how we are in each moment so that we can respond with the same kindness and care that we would with a good friend. And it's very important to recognize also that we have two different energies, two types of self-compassion. Sometimes we feel that compassion is more sweet and tender and giving. But the truth is that we need both energies, the tender or yin self-compassion and the fierce or yang self-compassion. And it's very important to know that this tender, comforting, reassuring, validating aspect of self-compassion is part of what we need to cultivate as we are starting to practice self-compassion, but it's very important to also practice this fierce aspect as we are more familiar with the tender energy, because we need to be able to protect ourselves, to say, no, this is not okay. I can't allow this, or this does not feel comfortable. So that protective aspect or the providing aspect or the encouraging aspect to really be able to achieve our goals are something that is as valid or as important as the tender, the kind, more sweet, more warm aspect of self-compassion. So we might have been kind of biased or identified with denying our fears' force. But part of the compassion training is reclaiming that fierce self-compassion force that is available for us to protect ourselves. I would like to stop here, Jorge, to see if there's anything that you would like to add as a self-compassion expert in terms of what it is and maybe what's the value in your life of self-compassion.
Well, I mean, I think there's always, and I want to make sure we get to shame because I know people are here to talk about shame, which is even weird to say, right? Let's just talk about shame. When we're experiencing, when the grips of it, we want to do the opposite, right? Hide from it. But I think, I mean, I practice and I teach self-compassion because self-compassion in many ways I feel has really saved my life from the grips of depression and grief, and really has transformed really challenging states with time and with practice, right? It's an ongoing practice. But this capacity to be able to hold ourselves with care, it can be so transformative. And I know that in my bones, and that's part of the reason that I teach it, to bring it to others. And we can explore more. I'm also aware of the time, but I don't know if there's anything else you want to say, Maria Paula, or I can start shifting into talking a little bit about shame.
Absolutely. Please go ahead.
Yeah, and does anybody have a pressing question now? I'm okay to around what Maria Paula mentioned before I begin sharing a little bit about what's shame. We're going to have some Q&A at the end as well, but if there's something that you want to ask, you can also drop it in the chat, and we can explore those questions as we move through our time together. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what is shame. Who here is familiar with shame? Can you raise your hand if you're familiar with shame? I expect to see all hands raised, right? Because shame is a universal emotion, right? It's so funny now we raise our hands and then the automatic on Zoom happens. But empathy, guilt, jealousy, shame, and pride are all categorized as self-conscious emotions. And the reason that they're referred to as self-conscious emotion is that they all require a degree of self-awareness in order for us to experience them. In other words, when we experience these emotions, our sense of self is being contrasted with either a different version of ourselves or another person. So these emotions require a social comparison. And I don't know about you, but my brain likes to compare myself to others all the time, right? And so if you can imagine emotions as being a toolbox for navigating life, the basic emotions like fear and happiness really help us survive. But the self-conscious emotions like guilt and empathy and shame take things a step further. And these complex feelings allow us to constantly adjust ourselves depending on the situation, right? Right now, I'm adjusting myself because I'm in this meeting and sharing and giving a presentation. And that will be very different if I'm casually talking about this with a friend. So they allow us to read because we're comparing what should I be doing? How should I be showing up? And also then allow us to adjust our behavior. So feeling guilty after doing something wrong makes us less likely to repeat it. So they have a purpose. right? So when we talk about shame and how challenging it can be, but it also has a purpose, and it's important to just keep that in mind. And for example, empathy lets us understand others. So it's this fine-tuning of our thoughts and action that helps us build complex social structures and also helps us with our relationships. So they're very important. However, some of the self-conscious emotions include negative self-evaluation, shame being one of them. And let me see, there's a new message. Let me see if I can see that. Oh, you put the slides. Thank you so much, Maria Paula. So Lewis speaks of shame being the self in the eyes of the other. And I love this, right? Because I'm imagining what you're imagining about me, and it's not good. So it's that comparison. I'm imagining what you're thinking about what I just did, and oh, that's not good. You're probably thinking something really badly about me. So shame is the feeling that everyone's judging you. It's those cringe-worthy feelings that come up that we all had from thinking you mess up in a way that makes you look bad to others. And more than that, it goes a step further. And it really is believing that you're fundamentally flawed and that others see you as undesirable because of it. So when we are in the grips of shame, we tend to perceive the whole self as defective. In other words, we make a general global negative self-evaluation. And this is important. We forget about all the many parts of us that are excellent in those moments. So have you ever felt like you have messed up so badly that it defines who you are? And probably all of us at some point have felt that way. That's shame. Michael Lewis described shame as this feeling of your entire self being flawed. And it often takes the form of a harsh inner critic, judging your whole worth based on a mistake or a situation. And so it makes us feel as a fundamentally bad person. And it's so powerful. It's so powerful that it can be very tough to shake off and really challenge our life in many different ways. So let's talk a little bit about the difference between shame and guilt. Because both shame and guilt are self-conscious emotion with negative valuation, but shame attacks the self. And shame is different from guilt, which is about feeling bad about something you did wrong, versus shame, which is more about how you imagine you appear to others because of your mistake. So some of the Tagney and Deering, they're big researchers on self-conscious emotion. They describe this very succinctly with guilt refers to feeling bad about something we did, and shame is feeling bad about something we are. And Brené Brown, those of you who are familiar with her work, which is fantastic, she even has something that really hits home for me. Guilt says, I made a mistake. And shame says, I am a mistake. And I'm going to invite all of you just for a few seconds to drop what you're doing, and if you can, in terms of if you're writing anything down, and go inside if you can, soft gaze, close your eyes, and take a moment to notice your body. And then repeat to yourself this sentence. I made a mistake. And just notice how that lands for you. And maybe you even are thinking about something that just happened or happened recently. I made a mistake. And then let go of that. And now repeat the sentence. I am a mistake. I am a mistake. And notice how that lands for you. And what did you notice? What did you notice from that? You can either put it in the chat or unmute and share. I like hearing voices personally. Just like I want the connection. But what do you notice any difference on how that lands? Yes. Is it is it novelette? Yeah.
Yeah, I felt like a foundational shift. Like I am a mistake. Felt very universally me, my being. I often say like I'm a horrible person.
Mm-hmm. So you're noticing that difference between, oh, I made a mistake versus I'm a mistake.
Yeah.
Yeah. And did you notice that it landed differently in your body?
Yeah, I was heavier in my body. The I am a mistake part.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. Anyone else had a similar experience or a different experience that you would like to share? Rena.
So when I said I am a mistake, I felt myself shrinking,
Mm-hmm.
and I felt these sensations in my body like almost trembling, and I can feel tears in my eyes.
Mm. Yeah. Thank you, Rena, for sharing that. It's powerful stuff. And we're saying these things to ourselves, and we're often not even aware that we're saying these things to ourselves when we're in the grips of shame. That's why it's so important to take a look at it compassionately and work with it. So shame is more common than, oh, let me see.
Yes, we have some on chat.
Yeah, thank you. I see. A mistake felt much more intense and uncomfortable in my body. Physical sensations were different in my body. Guilt felt like a knot in my stomach. Shame felt like my body dropped, like the air went out of it. I made a mistake was more of a, wait, it's not letting me. I made a mistake was more of a, I can't read that. Shame feeling.
A sharp feeling in my chest. I am a mistake felt more like a sinking, heavy feeling.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about, let me say a few more things about shame, and then we're going to transition into doing a practice. And thank you for your sharing, and just also honoring the tenderness that may arise when we did this exercise. Because that's the other thing, even with the practice we're going to do in a little bit, we titrate it, right? If it gets a little too intense, we just back off. Because some of us are holding more shame than others for many reasons. But at the core, shame is hidden. Shame is a lot more common than we think, especially self-shaming. Anytime we think ill of ourselves, that's shame. Shame is running through that. And it can be in very small ways. You're running late for a meeting because you overslept and you start saying, so I'm lazy, I can never get things right. Shame. Shame might be there. These are moments to invite, can we take a look at it, or reflect. So also, we are in a situation and something happened and we just have the feeling of being left alone. When we have that feeling, often shame might be there. Because remember, the shame might want us to hide. So shame is also mostly invisible. Shame is invisible because it wipes out the observer. The part of us that we need to see and work with shame. And that's really important. And that's why these practices and the self-compassion for shame class that Maria Paula and I are teaching soon really works on how do we make those invisible parts visible so we can work with it. Because shame usually wants us to disappear, to go small, to go silent, and to go away. And when shame is very severe, and I see this in my practice, it leads to dissociation. It's that experience of leaving our body so we don't have to feel any more pain, because shame is painful. And at other times, we engage in kind of dubious behaviors to hide from shame, such as getting angry at others instead, or numbing our feelings by working excessively or binging on entertainment or alcohol. And that's a way to numb ourselves from the pain of shame. The problem is that none of these, they're temporary solutions, but they're not really effective because someone has to be present to deal with shame. And what we know is the shame is always maintained by silence. We use in self-compassion for shame, we always say, you're only as unlovable as your secrets. And the thing is that we can be silent in public, but more importantly, we can also be silent inside ourselves. And many of us don't even realize that we hold shame in relationship to our identities or parts of ourselves. I have a lifelong intimate relationship with shame because I grew up as a gay kid in a very homophobic culture. And it took many years to separate the internalized negative messages I received from the larger culture when I was younger and that I fully believed, because a child is unable to make that distinction usually. So none of us were born feeling ashamed of ourselves. This is something we learn. Shame is a universal emotion, but we are not born feeling ashamed of ourselves. We all have the capacity to feel shame, but the shame that we carry around with us all the time is learned. It starts outside us in subtle and sometimes not so subtle messages that we receive from others, from our caregivers, and from the larger culture. And then it established residence in our hearts and in our bodies. And no one had a choice about the culture, family, or body we were born. Shame happens, and it usually is due to multiple factors. And so it is true that we often also feel shame because of something we did, but that shame doesn't stick around as much. It's the gnawing shame that never seems to go away, that it's mostly the product of how we have been treated, and that it really requires our attention. And the shame that we learn, that we internalize from others, is not our fault. But as Paul Gilbert always says, it is our responsibility. We need to do something about it if we don't want shame to control our lives. Because at the end of the day, I'll leave you with this before we move into the exercise, shame prevents us from living up to our potential. It plays a role whenever we're afraid to be authentic with others, when we hesitate to protect ourselves when we need to, or when we fail to seize opportunities that come our way because we don't feel we deserve them. And it's that inner voice, sometimes faint, sometimes really loud, that says, you can't do that. You don't deserve that. Or you're weird. That was a familiar one for me. Or who do you think you are? Anyone familiar with those voices, and I have an entire playbook of them, is about shame. And sometimes there's no voice at all. It's just a sense of feeling defeated. And some of you even share that in the examples around how it felt in the body, right? Like you're slumping. And over time, and I see this again and again in my practice, is shame can wear us down. It leads to anxiety, to depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, substance use, and the list goes on and on. And so that's why it's important to take care of it. I don't know if any of you have relatives or that they seem to be angry all the time. They can never, they're angry all the time. And I always now, knowing what I know is, I often think of shame. Because when we have an emotion that doesn't go away, it's usually shame running underneath, because shame makes other emotions sticky. They stick to us. The psychologist Marcia Sweezy said, blaming is tossing the hot potato of shame. So I'll leave you with the good news. The good news is that learning to work with shame can help dismantle a pile of difficult emotions. And personally, I can tell you that during my teenage years and young adulthood, I grappled with depression secondary to the shame of the internalized shame of being gay. And in the many ways I was told that my form of masculinity was not acceptable and that there was something wrong with me. And it was not until I was ready to take a look at shame that I was able to release those feelings and release those internalized scripts. And of course, that requires feeling safe enough to take the risk to take a look at it. And that's why we go slowly when we're working with shame. We go really, really slowly. So, and finally, I wanted to leave you that that self-compassion is the opposite of shame. I don't know if you put that slide there, Maria Paula. You have it?
Okay, I'll grab it. Yeah.
Yeah. Referring to the explanation that Maria Paula gave about self-compassion, we can see that self-compassion has the three components: self-kindness, common humanity, and mindfulness. And shame, on the other hand, has the opposite qualities: self-criticism, isolation, and over-identification. And so what we want to do now is to offer you a little taste of brief practice of how to work with shame in an informal way. And this is what we call in MSC, we have the self-compassion break, and this is the self-compassion break for shame. So any questions before we move on? Okay, Maria Paula, back to you.
Thank you so much, Jorge, for this beautiful intro to shame and how it is related with self-compassion. I would like to add, before we go into the practice, an aspect that has been really healing for me in understanding shame, and it is that it's an innocent emotion. It comes from the wish to be loved. So when we acknowledge and recognize that it comes from this very tender, innocent, shared experience that we all want to be loved, it really softens the experience. It can be very, very paralyzing, very traumatizing to live in shame, but it's not only the aspect of healing with self-compassion as a real antidote, but also understanding that it comes from a place of love, that it's really our nature. So as I was listening to you, that was what kept coming back to me, like, this is innocent. This is an innocent emotion. So thank you. Thank you for this beautiful intro.
Thank you for that, extending that. That was very important. Thank you, Maria Paula.
Yeah. And maybe some of you are familiar with this practice already. It's called the self-compassion break. We can do this as a formal practice, as we're going to offer it, but you can do this also as an informal practice on the go, on any situation during your day. You can bring these three components, and we're going to target it today into a situation where we feel a bit embarrassed or ashamed, but we want to keep it in a scale between 1 to 10 on a 4, more or less, 4 or 5. We don't really want to be fully activated or moved by this memory because we will have a brief practice. I'm going to invite you to settle in if you want to adjust your posture in any way that feels right for you right now, maybe stretching a little bit, closing your eyes, tuning in with your breath first. And bringing an event to mind when you felt embarrassed or ashamed. Maybe a situation where you overreacted, where you got angry, or maybe you said something that you didn't really mean. Maybe some email that you sent by accident. And when you notice that you're feeling shame, try labeling the experience as shame. This is how shame feels, in a very gentle and kind way. And noticing if you can drop your awareness down to your body to see how it feels in your body, where you can identify it the most. Allowing your experience to be just as it is. Maybe allowing a bit more room than usual to feel this shame in your body. And you can even label what you're afraid others might think of you, or what you think about yourself. Maybe you're thinking, I'm worthless, or I'm stupid, I'm a mess. And then remember that these are beliefs, but not facts. They are not true. And the negative beliefs are part of the experience of shame.
And as you continue to feel into the experience of shame you're recalling, you're probably feeling isolated or alone. And just notice how this feels in the body, heart, and mind. Because this is the nature of shame. But also remember that you're not alone, that everyone feels shame, and that shame is a universal emotion. And know that what you're experiencing right now is part of the human experience. remembering that many people would feel just as you do in the same situation. And also consider for a moment that you only feel this way because you, like every other human being, just needs to belong, to be appreciated, to be loved. And now let's see if we can respond to shame in a new way. Can you give yourself some kindness simply because you're having a moment of shame? So a way to do this is perhaps bringing to mind a living being, a child or a pet or a loved one, a friend, someone who has a lot of love or compassion and shows it in their eyes. And choose a being that is easy to love and be loved by. And see their eyes in your mind and allow yourself to bathe in their gaze. And then next, place a hand on the part of your body that feels shame the most. If you like, sending kindness through your fingers into that part of your body that is holding shame for you. Or gently rubbing that part of your body. And finally, consider for a moment what you would most like to hear in a moment like this. Perhaps words of comfort or support. For example, I love you, or I'm here for you, or you're a good person. Any word that feels authentic to what you would like to hear. And see if you can repeat those words for yourself in your own mind, in your own way. And take just a few more moments to give yourself kindness in the way that feels just right for you. It might be a kind gaze, soothing touch, some words of kindness, or all three ways at the same time. You can never get enough kindness. And now gently releasing this practice, taking a moment to offer your body any movement it needs, any stretching, and then gently transitioning, opening your eyes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jorge. And now we can use these last minutes that we have together, maybe sharing about your experience with this practice. If there's anything that you would like to share, how was this for you? What did you notice? How are you feeling right now? We would love to learn about your experience.
And also remembering, because we always do this, remembering that everything is welcome, from, oh, that was great because to, I don't know what I was doing, what we were doing, I just checked out. We want to hear all of it.
Absolutely. Patty, please go ahead.
Thank you, Jorge and Maria. Yeah, that was an interesting practice. I reflected over how I feel shy talking online. And that made me remember when I was a kid, I used to blush a lot. And my earliest memories from school was being asked a question by the teacher and then all the kids laughing because of my blushing. And I remembered what you saw, Jorge, about if there is a feeling that keeps persisting, then shame is somehow underneath. And there was definitely a lot of belief that something was wrong with me when I was growing up. So yeah, thank you very much for sharing this practice. It was good insights.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your generous sharing, Fadi. And I think it's just very important to remember that as adults, we have the superpower and the practice of self-compassion to hold those very difficult feelings as they arise. So I can feel my body while you were sharing, really my heart going out to you and being able also to relate in my own childhood. So thank you so much, Fadi, for sharing. I don't know, Jorge, you would like to add anything else?
I'm just curious if it's okay if I ask a follow-up question, Fali.
Please.
How did you meet that moment when you were in the practice and when your, I don't know, 8, 9-year-old came online?
Yeah, I tried not to focus too much on that because that would have been a very high
Okay.
intensity. So I just focused on the feeling of being shy, speaking up, or asking your questions in meetings, which was more of a 4 or 5. And at the moment, there was just a lot of curiosity and kindness in my approach, and it was like, oh yeah, that's why I feel a bit hesitant to ask. And I was like, well, that's not so bad anymore.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. And I really, a thing that, I mean, everything you said was very important. One of the things that really resonated with me is how you instinctively said, I don't want to go there. That's going to be too intense. I'm just going to focus here. That movement it's a movement of self-compassion. Maybe we can go there another time, but now that's too much. So I'm going to stay here. And that's a beautiful way of titrating our experience. And that's an act of self-compassion.
Sure.
So thank you, Fali.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes, Jan?
Felt ashamed there. I couldn't find my on button. Thank you two so much. You offered so many wise words and insights, and you're just very gentle in your presentation. So it was easy to reflect back on difficult times in my life. As I was going through this, I realized I too grew up gay in the Midwest, and felt for many years that I was an abomination on society. That was the phrase of shame I used to have. And after a lot of work and meditation and prayer and this, I realized that I had a shift, and I began to feel compassion for those who were judging me. And it's a continual process, because when I meet someone, they don't necessarily know I'm gay. So it's continually having to reveal and be vulnerable of that side of you or not. But it now is more of a process of, not feeling shame about that, but shame about maybe not being honest with people, or shame in how I respond when someone's homophobic or intolerant. So it's a different kind, but it doesn't feel as much of an abomination as it did for many years. So thank you guys very much. I appreciate what you're offering.
Thank you, Jan. And is it okay if I ask a follow-up question?
Of course. Yeah.
How are you feeling right now? Just checking in with your heart after that share.
I feel nervous public speaking, and I don't know you guys. And I also am not accustomed to feeling sort of having the word, being proud and being gay kind of for me in the same social context like this when strangers.
Yeah. Thank you for your courage to share that, because I know how difficult that can be. I know it also very well. And also your insight around how now the shame that might be arising is about not showing up for yourself in the ways that you might want to at times, either speaking up of who you are. And this is something that's very workable, and self-compassion can really help with that. Because sometimes the most compassionate thing we can do is to not say anything. Right? Because our safety first. Let's be clear, safety first. And sometimes not speaking is the safest thing to do. So also just honoring that. That we are assessing safety, and we can only be authentic in the face of safety. Otherwise, we need to take care of our hearts and of our bodies and of our emotional being. So, and this is part of what self-compassion really helps us. Like not here, not now. I mean, Maria Paula was talking about feel self-compassion. I'm not going to disclose personal stuff about it. Not with this crowd. That does not feel okay. And that's fear self-compassion. Just know that that's also assessing that and saying, nope, that's important. We need that. Because it's not always safe, no matter what, right? So
yeah, I appreciate that.
Thank you, Jan.
Thank you. Thank you for your generous sharing. It's been lovely to witness what just happened. Yes, thank you so much.
I'm aware of the time, but maybe we can get one more.
Absolutely. That's what I was going to
a couple of things. Yeah.
I do see a comment on chat from Sonia. Giving myself a compassionate touch brought me into the present, away from my thoughts. Beautiful, Sonia. Thank you so much for sharing. David, I ran into fear of vulnerability and lack of trust. Sharing could make my life worse. Thank you. Yes, please go ahead, Victoria.
So I realized that in the middle of all of this, and full disclosure, I'm a certified MSc teacher, and I've taught shame, and I wanted to sit in because I love Jorge's classes, and I've heard him in different programs that I've taken, and I had an entirely sleepless night last night. So when his voice went into his melodic leading, I actually fell asleep. And when I woke up, I was like, all these people are looking at me. And so that was an immediate burst of shame. But actually, it was the most self-compassionate thing I could have done for myself, because I was helping a friend last night who was in crisis. And I just didn't realize how tired I was. So I apologize for falling asleep on your beautiful meditation and leading us through. And I also thank you both very much for your wisdom and all the beautiful things that you do for the world. So thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. And cat naps can be so important, right? So there's that. And so just surrendering to what the body needs. All good. I'm glad that you had that moment.
Me too. But I'm sorry that everyone else was.
We didn't notice, so no worries at all. I hope it was a good nap. That's all I hope.
Yeah, you fell asleep with a lot of grace, because I did not notice that you were sleeping. So all good. And even if you were, that's fine too. That's all good. This is part of self-compassion, right? Ask, what do we need most right now? And it's that tendency I had to push through it. that's not self-compassion energy. Sometimes it's just need to take a nap. I can't do a meditation. I'm gonna nap instead. Or the body just says, you're not gonna do the meditation. I'm gonna take you offline for a moment. That's good. That's okay. So
Absolutely. And this also speaks to the opening and closing. We teach as well in MSc. So I want to honor your comment, David, on chat as well. And sometimes the kindness, most compassionate thing to do is to come back home, come back to our safe zone, and really protect ourselves and go like to those that we trust and to the places where we feel seen and validated and that we belong. And really listening to that is the most beautiful gift we can offer ourselves, especially when we are struggling or having a difficult moment. So I do want to honor what you shared on chat. And sometimes closing is the right medicine at the right time.
And if I briefly add to that, and I echoing what Maria Paula said, David, and for all of us, and in the class, there's a self-compassion for shame class that Maria Paula and I are it starts next week and we'll be teaching. But the class is built into that process of first creating safety in the group, because we can't practice self-compassion if we don't feel safe. So the whole class is designed very, very artfully, the work of Chris Germer and colleagues around creating safety and leaning into working with shame, but little by little. And as the group becomes more, feels safer and we get to know one another better, then we open to a little bit more, right? But sometimes we have a bad day and we have to close off and we can't go there. And so we really emphasize a lot the conscious opening and conscious closing as a way to work with self-compassion and different emotions, including shame.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jorge, for saying that. And as you mentioned, we will be hosting this course. I think it's one of the first courses out there from the 8-week protocol, Mindful Self-Compassion for Shame, developed by Chris over the past 2 or 3 years. I was part of the developing team. I was part of CMSC back then. Now, there was a teacher training early this year in February, and Jorge and I and a few other colleagues are beginning to teach these out in the world. So it will start July 8. It will be hosted at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. I don't know exactly what time that would be for Europe time, but we hope you can join us if you want to deepen your journey into self-compassion and shame. And if you haven't taken the full 8-week MSc training, you can do that first. And hopefully, Jorge and I will continue to offer the self-compassion for shame in the future, because it is a prerequisite. And here is Jorge's email for anything that you need. You'll have my email because you'll get the official GCC recording and follow-up email with the link of the class. But we are very grateful for your time, for your presence, for your generosity, and for sharing your practice with us.
Yes. Thank you, Maria Paula, for your wonderful presence, and for all of you for being here and taking this time of your busy days to take care of your hearts and to lean into your hearts. So
beautiful. And thank you, Joel, for being here with us and for us. It really does make a difference to know that there's someone caring for the group and for the session.
Absolutely. Thank you, Joel.
Thank you. Beautiful. We wish you a lovely rest of your day.
Please unmute to say goodbye so we can hear your voices.
Let's unmute.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
both.
So sweet.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very
Take
much.
care.
Thank you. Thank you so much.